Assalamu alaikum. Good evening to all of you out there from all parts of the world, whether in the United Kingdom, United States, South Africa, Asia, America, whichever part of the world. Good evening, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. This is a program by the South African Debate Initiative. And today we basically will be focusing on and discussing a situation in relation to a report that was released by the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research and a separate Barcelona-based Center for Democratic Studies that was essentially looking at the number of conflict-related deaths in this Gaza genocide. This is a Gaza genocide. You know, there are a lot of whites in South Africa that support this because these dirty whites were the same whites that supported the apartheid regime. So I've come across a lot of whites. The vast majority of people who support the genocide in South Africa have been whites. But these same whites need to know that you've got a German institute that is now stating that more than 100,000 people have been murdered by the Israelis. This is a study that estimates a median of approximately 112,069 fatalities for the first 2 years of the conflict. So you're looking at a period of October 7th, 2023 to approximately October 6th, 2025, with a range of 99,997 to 125,915. Yeah, I see there's a message from a chap from the United Kingdom. Sarfaraz, he's more than willing to come in. You can come in, brother Sarfaraz. If you're there out there, you can get that friend, the Zionist, that Muslim Zionist, I forget his name, who supported Israel. Get them now, because now the more and more these facts are coming out, the more we're being vindicated. And I don't know anyone out there who's sick enough and satanic enough to support this kind of genocide. I mean, even these Christian YouTubers, what these people like David Wood and his boyfriend, Apostasy Prophet, or something, the chap who calls himself Apostasy Prophet, or whatever the case is, they've been supporting Israel. Now he's been exposed as a rapist. This chap, David Wood, has been exposed as raping 13-year-old girls. This useless David Wood, 13-year-old girls, useless YouTuber, and anally raping 16-year-old. Sam Shamoun was found raping a person who was a woman in ministry. He raped her. I've had dealings with these scoundrels for years who are, I wouldn't say Sam who's supportive of Israel, but David certainly, and his newfound boyfriend, heavily supportive of the state of Israel. They've been now exposed. So the Israeli supporters and the Israeli propagandists have been exposed for the vile vermin that they are. And they're exposing themselves, and we're going to deal with those issues. So coming back to this institution, this Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research, it states that more than 112,000 people have been murdered. They used a pseudo-Bayesian modeling approach, I don't know how that works, to account for uncertainty and incomplete data. And they incorporated information from sources including the Gaza Health Ministry, household surveys, social media, and UN agencies. So the Gaza Health Ministry count, as it stands now, is close to about 70,000. It's much lower than this. You see, they basically accused Gaza Health Ministry of giving inflated status. We now know that the status of murders being committed by the Israelis in this genocide against Gazans are far lower than what the actual figures are. The study indicates that approximately 27% of those who died were children under 15, and about 24% of those murdered were women. Life expectancy in Gaza dramatically decreased, falling by about 44% in 2023 and 47% in 2024. 47% in 2024. That's extremely high. It's like half the population are more likely to die. And since the so-called ceasefire apparently came into commence, the genocide continued. There's something like about 500 Palestinians that were murdered since the so-called ceasefire was announced, so which shows that there's no ceasefire. Palestinians are being killed in Gaza presently, not at the scale that happened during the genocide, but still at a high scale. More Palestinians are being killed now during the ceasefire than more Israeli civilians were killed during October 7th. That tells you a lot. During a point, where's the global outrage? Everybody's gone silent. What's happened to the Muslim world? What's happened to MBS? He goes and meets Trump and he promises him $1 trillion, obviously over a period of time. But what's happened to these Muslim leaders, these scoundrels? Look at, I'll show you some of the videos of Jolani being perfumed by Trump, the Fir'aun of our time, and Netanyahu and so on. These are our leaders. Our leaders are down in the dumps. Our political establishment is rotten to the core. Your religious establishment, with the exception of a certain select few alims, are quiet. And of course, your so-called social media influencers, the so-called YouTubers, and those YouTubers, I'd put them at the lowest scale of the ladder in terms of involvement on Islam and on Dawah, etc. I'll put them right down. They basically have gone silent. So I made a point to Muhammad about a week ago that, look, I think it's important. We need to still keep up with these issues. We need to discuss also what's going on in Sudan and other parts of the world. But this is something that just cannot basically be ended. And as I'm speaking, I get the same garbage again and again. These same cowards, these same satanic filth that send these abusive messages when I basically share the StreamYard link and the YouTube link. They don't have the guts to come on. They can swear and send satanic messages, but they don't have the guts to come on this program. I've sent this all in white, Sandri. Come on now. I'll resend it again. I'll resend this again. For those of you who want to join, come and join and challenge me on your position. Come and join and tell me that what I'm saying is wrong. Be bold enough for once. Don't be a coward. We've had too many cowards for a long, long time. And those cowards have now gone silent. If you recall this platform and these programs when they started at the beginning of 2024, end of 2023, we used to get those regular fanatics coming on this program. Now, those cowards are basically limited. They're limited to essentially just sending abusive messages. But we're going to continue. We're not going to stop. We're going to continue. We won't stop at all. We won't stop at all. We will continue in relation to this. This is the kind of evil that you are dealing with. I'm just fed up. I'm shocked at the horrendous messages that again. This basically shows the type of individuals that we are basically dealing with in a general sense. So now I want to basically open up this report. This is a report which is from the Max Planck Institute. I'm going to share this with you. Let me share the screen. Here we are. This is a screen. Mohammed, if you can share this on your side. I know you backstage. Let me share this here. And I'm going to expand this. So what you've got here is the Max Planck Institute, which did research. Gaza study reveals unprecedented losses of life and life expectancy. A study by the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research and the Center for Demographic Studies examined the effects of the conflict in Gaza on mortality. Life expectancy has fallen in 2024 to less than half of the level that would be expected without the war. A research team, investigated the impact of the conflict in Gaza on mortality. They estimate that 78,000 were killed between October 7th, 2023 and December 31st, 2023. An update of the analysis produced after the publication of the study revealed that the current violent death toll likely exceeds 100,000. More than 100,000. It's a genocide. It's clearly a genocide. In the methodological study, the research team presents a model that explicitly takes into account two particular measurement errors: the uncertainty about the number of fatalities and the uncertainty regarding the age and gender of the victims, which are not captured in aggregated death counts, because the Gaza Health Ministry is quite specific. So here you've got the life expectancy at birth in Palestine at the national and regional levels. And you look at the figures: 2012, 14, 16, 20, 22, 24. Look at the figures. Look at the figures. This is the kind of filth that we basically are dealing with. By the Israeli filth causes this rubbish. The same Israeli filth that sends me these abusive messages cause this kind of murder. So using a pseudo-Bayesian modeling approach, the study estimated that 78,000 were killed between October, and the figures right now surpass more than 100,000. The scientists offer a flexible approach to estimating conflict-related mortality. Advances in statistical modeling make it possible to partially account for the little fog of war. Our estimates of the impact of the war are significant, but probably represents only a lower limit of the actual mortality burden. And this is the figures that you essentially. So there's this is a summary of the actual publication, but just note that this is a German outlet, and this German outlet is now saying that the number of Gazans that were mass murdered by the Israelis during the genocide and presently have now exceeded a figure of 100,000. Get this facts and share it. Share it with everybody. Share it with as many people as you can basically speak to and see. The other newspaper reports that say the same thing. This is another newspaper report. It's got far more graphic pictures in terms of what is really happening on the ground. If you look at what's happening, we can share this. This is from the Turkish website, AA Anadolu. Over 100,000 people died in Gaza. Top German Research Institute reports. And look at this below. Look at this. Look at this. Can you see this image? Well, what is this? What is this? Human shields? Is that what they were doing? They were going after tunnels. The tunnels are still intact. Look at this. You know, I keep on making analogies to a program or a series that they used to show called The Walking Dead, about some kind of zombie apocalypse. This is worse than that. If you look at the zombie apocalypse, the houses are still intact. The buildings were still intact. Just the people had turned into zombies and Walking Dead. This is the reality of Gaza as it stands now. This is the figures. And as it stands now, 28th of November, the UN says staff, civilians are still coming under fire in Gaza, despite the ceasefire. Civilians have to be protected. The UN Humanitarian Office said on Friday that despite a ceasefire in the Gaza, its staff and facilities continue to come under fire. In a statement, OSHA states that, and what's the reason for the ongoing attacks? Explain the reason for the ongoing attacks. And not only that, because we're going to turn to the West Bank. If you look at the occupied West Bank, the killings continue unabated. Updated OSHA figures show that more than 1,600 Israeli settler attacks have occurred since early 2025. This year, and have affected there's not individuals, 270 Palestinian communities. The number of Palestinians injured has now topped 1,000, including about 700 directly hurt by Israeli settlers, roughly double the figures recorded in 2024. Settler violence is continuing, and the Israeli soldiers are aiding and abetting the settlers in relation to what is happening. And this is the point. In Gaza, they're coming under fire. In the West Bank, they're coming under fire. Where are our Muslim leaders? Where are our alims? Where are our social media influencers? Where are they? You see, if you've got multiple subscriptions, you shouldn't be worried about algorithms. That should be because you've got your fan base that will support you. So why don't you discuss this? Why don't you go through any of this? Why is it that you choose to focus on irrelevant personal issues between each other? Social media influencers attacking each other. Why? I mean, you don't even attack those Islamophobe YouTubers out there like Wood and Shamoon, who are basically now conceded to be rapists and child abusers. I mean, I'll say it openly. Come and sue me, David Wood. You raped a 13-year-old girl. You raped 13-year-old girls. This is according to what you stated. You anally raped a 15-year-old repeatedly. And you were smug about it when you basically were boasting on those channels. Now, these Dawa influencers, why is it that you don't spend any time discussing or exposing these individuals? You expose your own kind. Why don't you spend any time discussing what's going on presently as we talk, as the killing is happening and continuing? Why is it that right now Israel is detaining dozens of Palestinians every week? This is latest news. Look at the dates, 29th of November. Israel detains dozens of Palestinians every week in occupied West Bank. They're subjected to field interrogations and torture. This is an organization, Palestine Prisoners Society. They state that we document that during the latest operation launched on November 26, 162 Palestinians were detained in Tubas alone. The field interrogations involve severe beatings, provocations, and threats, and that soldiers destroy belongings and steal money during home raids. And as it stands now, the Israeli army has forcibly displaced more than 42,000 Palestinians from refugee camps in Jenin and Tulkarem, destroying them. It goes to these areas and it destroys the houses of the Palestinians. It destroys the houses and then it takes it over for these Israeli settlers. And it ensures that these particular Palestinians are left utterly homeless. It destroys their houses, takes over the land. So it allows settlers to come in. When the Palestinians resist, the Israeli soldiers come and shoot them dead. And then it steals their homes. It steals their homes. Can you see that? It steals their home. Again, UN committee warns of organized, widespread ill treatment in Israel's actions since October 2023. This was a finding of the UN Committee Against Torture that was basically highlighting what was going on at this Day Teiman prison camp, where Israeli soldiers were stating that they have the right to rape. This is part of their culture. It's just maybe they got it from the Bible. They got it from Numbers 31, verse 17, and 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 3. and the book of Deuteronomy chapter 20, which allows you to rape and slaughter and maim people whom the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, those from the outside furthest regions and those near you. Those that the Lord your God gives you for an inheritance, you slaughter everybody. Those from distant lands, you slaughter the men, but you take their women as sex slaves and you rape them, and you take their children as your slaves and you rape them as well. That's what the Bible says. If you're going to challenge it, then we can deal with it. Come and challenge me on what I said. But this is what you see being committed by the Israelis: rape and murder. So this was a UN Committee Against Torture on Friday. It released a report, and it especially spoke that these are not, you see, one of the problems people assume is that these are aberrations, that there may be just somebody that is a rogue soldier or a rogue official that is engaging in such particular actions or activities. But you now have a situation where there is a de facto state policy of organized and widespread torture and ill treatment. And this has gravely intensified since 7th of October 2023. The committee called on Israel to establish an independent, impartial, effective ad hoc advisory commission. That won't happen. To examine allegations of torture, ill treatment, and prosecute those responsible, including superior officers. That won't happen again. Again, the figures that it gives here are the Gaza figures. I told you the Max Planck Institute gives a higher figure. And you've got a situation that more than 170,900 people have been displaced or injured. So what do you do? What do you do in a situation like this? Explain. How do you deal with the situation? And now you've got a situation of extrajudicial killings. Just 3 or 4 days ago, as was reported yesterday, but 3 or 4 days ago, we have a situation of footage of Israeli soldiers executing 2 Palestinians in Jenin, in the Jenin refugee camp. In the Jenin refugee camp. Please, people, come on board. If you want to talk and discuss, you know, it's a coward that firstly, you want to meet me face to face. That's the messages that I'm getting here. But you are not even bold enough to put your camera on. You're such a coward that you're not even bold. Firstly, you want to meet me face to face. You send me messages, but you're not even bold enough. You're such a coward that you can't even come on this platform. You can't even come on this platform, let alone that you don't even want to put on the camera. You know, all those who have come and threatened us, you are so cowardly to even put on the camera, and you want to come and meet me face to face? Who are you bluffing? Who are you lying to? Who are you lying to when you say that? You want to meet me face to face, but you are so scared to put on your camera and even come on this program now. I've sent you the StreamYard link. If you're bold enough to say what you're saying on these messages, then be bold enough to come on this platform. I'll give you a voice, but you won't, because you know you're a coward and you're so frustrated that all you can do is limit yourself to sending messages and SMSs, because like the Israelis, you're a coward. Israelis and Israeli supporters are de facto cowards. They can murder and kill and bomb and destroy and mass murder children and send abusive, vulgar SMSs, but they can't come and show their face on a camera. Nor can they even come. Okay, if you want to hide your face. At least let your voice be heard. You're even a coward to do that. You're a coward to even let your voice be heard. You're so sick and satanic. You're a coward to even let your voice be heard. That's how sick you are. You Christian apologists who support the state of Israel, come on board and try and defend Israel now. Come and defend them 2 years later. You're a coward. You won't come on. This is the reality of the situation. This is what we're dealing with. We deal with sick people, and you can send death threats. You can send as many things as you want to. You see, we don't boast like these missionaries who lie that Muslims send them death threats. We don't boast. But come on board. That UK guy, I deleted your message, so I even forgot what your name is. Come. We're waiting. But now coming to the situation here, this is what is happening. I want to share something now in relation to what transpired about a few days ago. This was in Jenin. Mohammed, just share this as I show this to you here. This was captured by Mondoways. If you can share this. Outrage after footage of Israeli soldiers executing 2 Palestinians in Jenin goes viral. The killing of there were 2 unarmed Palestinians. We don't know who they were or what they were doing. They were in the city of Jenin. They were in the refugee camp of Jenin, and then we saw them lifting up their hands. I think showing a white flag, but lifting up their hands and lifting up their vests to show they've got no suicide vests or anything like that. And then they lay on the ground, meaning they were totally surrendered to the soldiers. They then appeared to be directed by the soldiers to go back inside the garage, where one of the troops then goes and murders him. I see they've identified the people there. I don't know, at the time of when I was listening to his reports, we don't know who these individuals now were. Now, these victims have been identified as Muntasir Billah Abdullah and Yusuf Asasa. One is 26, meaning 10 years ago he would have been 16, a child. And a further 10 years ago, in 2005, he would have been 6. And Yusuf Asa, youngsters. He's a youngster, 26. The Palestinian ministry has called this an extrajudicial killing. But people like the satanic Ben Gvir has stated that these people must die because they are terrorists. So here's it. This is what we've got here. Here was the footage. Let me show the footage here. Here's the footage. You see the guy, he's lifting his shirt. They're lifting their hands up. They're lifting their hands up. Now they're on the ground. Now they're on their knees. Now he's kicking. Can you see that? Can you see the Israeli soldiers kicking him whilst in his defensive position? There's the other guy. They're defenseless, no weapons, nothing. Then this guy here, the one here, shoots them both dead. And this lorry drops the whole thing on them, on their dead bodies. Can you see that? Now, when they go in, now can you see the soldier on the right? He's pointing a rifle at them, pointing an assault rifle at them. They're still awake now. At this juncture, this individual is still awake. These people are still awake and they're sitting. He shoots them. Then they die. They shoot them both. Then they get the crate to drop the entire shutter on their dead bodies. Can you see that? To crush them to death. I didn't see that part, by the way. I just saw the shooting, but this is the first time I'm seeing with the audience the part where they get the shutter and they get the tractor to drop the entire shutter on their dead bodies after they're being shot. Shoots them. Now crushes their body with the shutters. Can you see that? The entire thing collapses on them, crushes them, crushes their dead bodies. Now come here, you Satanists, and defend this evil. Defend this evil. How on earth do you defend this? Explain this to me. Itamar Ben-Gvir basically has received reports of this, and he says they totally support the Israeli soldiers. Now, what kind of assessment or review of the actions will be conducted? None. None. And even though there's totally widespread condemnation by human rights groups like B'Tselem, they said that the execution is a result of an accelerated dehumanization process of Palestinians. And it's reflective of the impunity of the Israeli regime. The UN Office of the High Commissioner condemned the killings. But this is not new. This is not an isolated incident. In 2022, for example, the Palestinian Human Rights Association, they documented 38 cases of arbitrary murder of Palestinians by Israeli forces. Now, we're not even talking about settlers, because the settlers are even more. It's Israeli settlers and Israeli soldiers that are killing Palestinians on the West Bank. There's been arbitrary killings of 38 in 2022. Yet the number of Palestinians killed in the West Bank has risen sharply, with maybe at least close to 2,000 Palestinians murdered by Israeli forces or settlers in the past 2 years in the West Bank. 2,000 murdered. And you see, the thing is, people sometimes talk about the high murder rate in South Africa and so on. Yes, there is. But these are criminal actions. What we are talking about, the distinction here, is murder being committed by the state or state-sanctioned murder of the settlers. This is murder being committed by the settlers. So the killing of the Palestinians comes exactly 2 days after the Israeli army announced the launch of these new kind of wide-scale military actions, which basically happened which basically commenced in the refugee camps of Tulkarem, which basically commenced in Jenin and all these other areas. And the main aim certainly is basically to get rid of the Palestinians. To get rid of the Palestinians. Get rid of them and destroy them in total. Destroy them in total. In fact, Jenin and the adjacent refugee camps have been the center of Israeli military raids since late 2021. And now you've got movements like which we should support, like the Jenin Brigade, made up of Christians, Marxists, and Muslims who are legitimately resisting Israel's genocidal plans on the West Bank. So at this stage, I may say the one positive thing that is coming out of this, I don't know if you can call it positive, but the one positive thing we can call it is that Israel is losing the battle of public opinion. They've lost. They've lost the battle of public opinion. All their supporters have been exposed as repulsive, vile, satanic vermin. All their YouTube Zionist Christian supporters have been exposed as rapists and liars. Around the world, more people are recognizing the reality of Israeli apartheid and the ongoing genocide of Palestinians. And that shift didn't happen by itself. It happened because people essentially organized, they documented, and they refused to be quiet when power demanded silence. And so when that happens, the backlash is fierce. Like our channel. Our channel has been shadow banned. Our channel's South African Debate Initiative YouTube channel has been shadow banned. Coventry Faith Foundation shadow banned. accounts disappear, social media platforms limit reach, officials criminalize solidarity. So now you've got in the United Kingdom a group like Palestine Action UK. And by the way, if you're listening, I support Palestine Action. Not speaking about my goals from the UK, but I support it. And I'll come there to the United Kingdom and I'll boldly say, I support Palestine Action UK. I support Hamas to the hilt. Of course, we could criticize Hamas on many other issues. If they were to ever come into power, they'd be akin to the Muslim Brotherhood leadership in Egypt for the short period. And there's obviously legitimate criticisms you can make, but insofar as resistance against Israel is concerned, I support them to the hilt. I support Hezbollah to the hilt. Palestine Action UK is not even a terrorist organization. Why would someone like your Home Minister, who was once upon a time a powerful supporter of the Palestinian cause, suddenly want to criminalize it? Why would you go and arrest? I mean, doesn't it say a lot when you arrest 82-year-old, 85-year-old grandmothers and grandfathers? Does it show that you've got no values, no decency? So for those out there, if you want to help this momentum in destroying Israel, and that's why Netanyahu has basically been mandating that they pay social media influencers up to $7,000. You see, they need money to support Israel. We don't need money from Hamas or from the Palestinian Authority or from any organization to support Palestine. We support them because it's a moral issue. I'm not getting paid. None of our channels are monetized. My channels are monetized. I don't get a cent. I'm not getting a cent from doing this program. Nobody's paying me. Nobody's paying Muhammad. I owe nobody, anybody, nothing, and I don't get paid by anybody. I don't go and raise money for and on behalf of the Palestinians because I don't know how to get that money into Gaza. The Israelis restrict it, unlike other organizations that want to use the Palestinians to raise funds and so on. But how they get the money there is another question. I don't do any of that. All we ask for is get this channel out there. Like and subscribe to our channel. If you want this momentum to continue to rubbish the state of Israel as a satanic apartheid crazy state, as a state which has absolutely no right to exist, because it has to be dismantled completely and utterly. Be bold enough. You know, everybody asks questions. Do you support Israel's right to exist? Yes, I do. I support Israel's right to exist in hell. I support Israel's right to exist in hellfire. That's where I support Israel's right to exist. So get me on your show, Piers Morgan. I'll be bold enough to say it. Or most of your panelists, some of them who are pro-Palestinian, are too afraid to state an obvious truth. I'll say it there. I'll say that I support what happened on October 7th in terms of the original resistance. I'll expose the fact that the Israeli soldiers massacred the vast majority of Israelis on that day. Get those who will play out your game. So to the viewers out there, if you want this momentum to continue, help empower it. Viewers, support by liking and subscribing to our channels, and by sharing our channels on other platforms, and by clipping our channels, because there's no copyright. You can take anything, provided you don't take it out of context. Makes our reporting on the subject accessible. It basically protects our independence. And it ensures that the next story or the next kind of conversation or analysis from the West Bank or Gaza, that next analysis that arms you for hard conversations is continuous and is indeed published and widely shared. So I urge you to do that. If you want to make a donation to Brother Muhammad, I don't have a account that you can make a donation to, but if you want to make a donation to the Coventry Faith Foundation for the excellent work he's doing, do so. But we've never asked for money for this, because we are not after money. We're after truth, we're after justice, and we're out here to basically expose the evil that is basically out there, which is the Israeli state. I may just add that there's an interesting book that I came across recently. It's just been released on that issue. Since we're talking about public media relations. It's by Harriet Malinowitz. I think it's a he or she, I'm not so sure, that wrote a new book called Selling Israel. I haven't read it yet. I've seen reviews on it. Selling Israel, Zionism, Propaganda, and the Use of Hasbara. It basically reveals how Israeli propaganda and public relations promoted Zionism whilst concealing the oppression of the Palestinians and the dispossession of Palestinian lands. And, essentially what this book does is that not only systematically examines them, but dives into how the Hasbara, globally enacted by the Israeli government, has been continuing for promoting the fallacy that the Israelis are indeed victims, which they're not, for the past 78 years. So I urge you to get a copy of the book. Let me see if I can share it on the screen. This is where I picked it up. I'm going to try and share this. I've never seen this publishing company before, but I assume you can probably get it on Amazon as well. I must just make sure of it, but I'd like a copy of this book here. Here's it here. Can you see it, Mohammed? Please share the screen. From Interlink Publishing. It gives you the opportunity to pay. That's my card, by the way. I don't have the amount right now to buy it, but I may get it. It's by Harriet Malinowitz. Harriet Malinowitz. Here we are. Selling Israel, Zionism, Propaganda, and the Uses of Hasbara. Professor of English, specializing in writing, rhetoric, and Palestine studies. Selling Israel is an essential read for anyone seeking to understand the deep-rooted propaganda strategies behind one of the world's most contested conflicts. That's it there. Zionism, propaganda, and the use of Hasbara, that's Israeli propaganda. So those who want that book, try and get a copy of it if you want. Probably it's something that I would recommend. I still have to read it to see how good it is. But from the reviews that I've seen, it appears to be fairly decent. It's a new book. I would like to read it. But this is something for those of you to essentially purchase. So before I end this this segment on the section here on the killing, I just want to lastly play this Sky News report on the West Bank shooting, which just shows the graphic nature of it. And in fact, even the BBC and Sky News seem to have given analysis on what transpired on this particular aspect. Let me just see if I can see this and share this with the rest of you here. I'm just going to share my screen again. Hope there's no advertisements.
And let ClickUp AI Note Taker do it for you. It allows you to focus on your meetings, not.
Now, footage has emerged which shows Israeli forces killing 2 Palestinian men in the West Bank after they appeared to surrender. The men are seen leaving a building and lying on the ground in front of Israeli forces in the northern city of Jenin. Palestinian authorities have identified them as 26-year-old Al-Muntasir Abdullah and 27-year-old Yusuf Asasa. Both men lift their T-shirts, they hold their hands in the air, apparently to show that they were not carrying weapons or explosives. The Israeli soldiers then appeared to order the men back inside the building before they were shot. Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons is in Jerusalem and has the latest.
As so often, you have a massive schism, frankly, between the two sides, because there is outrage among Palestinian communities at what they see as an extrajudicial killing by Israeli forces. This was carried out by the Israeli border police who actually operate under the auspices of the IDF, and there were Israeli military troops there as well at this moment. This was all part of a very, very big series of activities in the Jenin area, which has long been a scene of tension between Israel, which of course occupies the West Bank through its military, and Palestinians who have pushed back against that occupation. So Israel will describe these people as having been terrorists. The Palestinians, I'm sure, will push back against that, and they will look at that video and say these were people who were trying to surrender at the time, and already a number of legal experts in the West Bank have accused Israel of either an extrajudicial killing or, in some more pointed comments, a war crime by shooting a prisoner who is in the process of trying to surrender. So this has real combustible potential at a time when tensions are high in the West Bank. Now, the Israelis deny all of that. Itamar Ben-Gvir, the very far-right minister in charge of national security, says that, quote, terrorists must die, and offered his...
So they don't want to give them a trial. Let's assume they were. But look at the sadistic nature of the killing. They shot them dead. Then they had a crane dump the entire shutter and crush their bodies in two. How sick can you get?
Full support to the IDF and the border police. And the IDF has put out a statement. Let me read it to you. It says, the wanted individuals were affiliated with a terror network.
You see, again, we have the usual garbage affiliated with a terror net. Why would Sky News go and become propagandists for the Israelis? The forces entered the area which is suspect and initiated a surrender procedure. It lasted several hours. Several hours? Did that look like several hours? It looked like a few minutes. A few minutes. And you crushed them.
In the area of Jenin, the forces entered towards the suspects, and fire very clearly did happen. The question is the circumstances at the end. The Israeli politicians who are, as I say, cheerleading for this, Itamar Ben-Gvir among them.
So, as usual, you have a situation where, I don't know how the BBC's coverage on this was.
Video has emerged showing Israeli security forces shooting dead 2 Palestinians after they'd surrendered in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. Israel says it's investigating. Our correspondent John Donnison is in Jerusalem for us.
What is there to investigate? What is there to investigate? What will happen?
Now, John, what's in this video?
Well, Rita, this happened in Jenin, which is a big Palestinian city right in the north of the West Bank. And over the past 2 years, it's seen some of the heaviest Israeli military activity, really, across the whole of the West Bank. Now, what this CCTV shows is 2 men emerging from a building, and they come out with their hands up, sort of on their hands and knees. One of them lifts up his shirt to perhaps show that he isn't armed, and they appear to be surrendering. But then for some reason, it appears that they are sent back into the building. They crawl back in, and then we're going to lose the pictures at this moment, because this is a moment where the Israeli soldiers appear to open fire and shoot them dead at point blank range. Now, the Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom has called these summary executions. Israel, for its part, has said these 2 men...
It's not summary executions, it's continuation of the genocide and normative for Israel to do that.
Were wanted men, and Israel's hardline right...
So again, BBC falls into the trap of once again promoting Israeli propaganda by saying wanted men. Even if you wanted, who gets to kill them and crush them to death?
Wing National Security Minister has defended the operations of the security forces, saying terrorists must die. But both the military and the police say they're going to review the incident. And on first glance, the question is, when these 2 men have been brought out, apparently surrendering, why were they not just arrested, bundled into some sort of police van? Why were they sent back in and then shot?
John Donnison.
So that's basically the BBC. So the Western media, but even when something is so graphic and so obscene in its particular nature, you have a situation where the Western media will always inevitably try and find some sort of excuse for its particular actions. I wonder if those of you who are familiar as it stands right now, because we're going to move on to the latest report by the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights. And it is this particular, I think there was a report on the legal analysis of the conduct of Israel in Gaza pursuant to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. That was on the 16th of September, 2025. And then I've got another report in October 2025, which essentially is also being produced and presented by Francesca Albanese. I have mentioned that I wanted to get Francesca for this program. I haven't reached out to her. So let's just hope that will happen, if it's even possible, before the end of the year. Before we close this program, if there are no other guests to come on, I want to share this report on the Gaza genocide being a collective crime. And this was a report published in October 2025, just about a month ago from now, a month ago. Agenda item 72C, the situation of the human rights in Palestine. And so this was a special report by Francesca, where she starts off by saying that the ongoing genocide is a collective crime sustained by the complicity of third states, like the United States and others, that have enabled long-standing systematic violations of international law by Israel, framed by colonial narratives that dehumanize the Palestinians, and so on and so forth. And then she basically starts off, without the direct participation, aid, and assistance of other states, the prolonged unlawful Israeli occupation would not have been sustained. That's a reality. You've got the military support, the financial support of the United Kingdom, the United States, and the unwillingness to hold Israel accountable has essentially enabled Israel to embed its regime of settler colonial apartheid with more colonies, home demolitions, and loss and erasure of Palestinian life. In light of this complicity, this report demonstrates that the ongoing genocide of the Palestinians must be understood as an internationally enabled crime. Well said. Many states, but primarily Western ones, have facilitated, legitimized, and eventually normalized genocidal campaign perpetrated by Israel. By portraying Palestinian civilians as human shields and the broader onslaught in Gaza as a battle of civilization against barbarism, they have reproduced the Israeli distortions of international law and colonial tropes, essentially seeking to justify their own complicity in genocide. And then it goes on, it lays down how this report was in fact developed. And of course, the legal framework in relation to what international law in fact imposes on various states to bring an end to the settler colonial violation that is happening in mass scale. But there was an interesting point that I had seen in this particular report. Here we are. This is interesting. Following 7th of October, most Western leaders, they still do, parroted Israeli narratives disseminated by state and corporate media, repeating debunked claims and erasing core distinctions between combatants and civilians. You know, the debunked claims were like Biden, the sleepy Joe, senile Joe, demented Joe, repeating beheaded babies. I think Trump repeated the same thing. The beheaded babies myth. Can you imagine that 2.5 years later, it's still being repeated? Still being repeated. Mass rape, still being repeated. The only rapists out there that we see are the Israelis. The only rapists that you really see in the scheme of things are the Israelis, no one else. Let me expand this and make this far more easier for the eye. Where were we now? Yeah, we're here. So essentially, what you have in this particular report is an assessment in terms of what has happened over the past 2 years. So, for example, she starts off on paragraph 14 that the Israeli crimes have increased dramatically. On the 26th of January, we had the famous ICJ ruling. In May 2024, the court had issued further provisional measures. And the ICC prosecutor had sought arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. And then in 2024, we've also discussed this, July 2024, the advisory wall opinion, where the illegal occupation was recognized and the UN Assembly made the point that the occupation must be dismantled by 18th of September 2025. Well, it's quite clear that that was never going to happen. We're now on the 29th of November. And this is the situation. Then the other thing, on 16th of September 2025, hear this out here because people don't know. Wasn't by the ICJ, but the UN Commission of Inquiry concluded that Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip, reaffirming the obligations of all states to prevent genocide. Those developments confirm the seriousness of the breaches of the peremptory norms. And under existing law, the extent of Israel's actions render any distinction between the Israel and the occupied territories legally and practically impossible. So this basic report gives an assessment. I urge you to look at this report. It goes on, for example, to speak about the military assistance. I mean, you look at guarantees up until 2028 of $3.3 billion. You look at the military sales. Military sales. And what happens when Israel purchases money, the United States gives Israel money. And Israel uses that money to pay for weapons, which it doesn't even buy because it's using the US money. So the F-15s and the F-16s and the F-35 jets, all being sponsored by the United States. So effectively, the US government is aiding its military-industrial complex. Look at this. By September 2024, after the genocide had already commenced, the US supplied 57,000 artillery shells, 36,000 rounds of cannon ammunition, 20,000 M4A1 rifles, 13,981 anti-tank missiles, and 8,700 Mk-82 500-pound bombs. 500-pound bombs. By April 8, 2025, Israel had 751 active sales valued at $39.2 billion. Both the Biden and the Trump administrations have enabled this constant flow of weapons, except for a short pause on the delivery of the 500 and 2,000-pound bombs on the eve of the Israeli attack on Rafah in May 2024. And that stopped in July because after July, they started giving them 500-pound bombs. And in January 2025, they started giving them 2,000-pound bombs. So there was only a hiatus for a small time. And your country in Europe, Germany, has been the second largest exporter to Israel during the genocide. Imagine that. And again, we see once again the weaponization of the Holocaust. Once again, weaponization of the Holocaust. Your country, Mohammed, the United Kingdom, they played a key role. And that's what Palestine Action UK did when they put graffitis at some of these arms manufacturing companies. I mean, they were basically making a point, that's not an act of terrorism. Kind of law states that that's terrorism when there's some kind of civil disobedience. But you can charge them for malicious damage to property. How is that terrorism? How is that terrorism? From its bases in Cyprus, the UK has enabled a crucial US supply line to Tel Aviv and flown over 600 surveillance missions over Gaza throughout the genocide. States frequently deployed two arguments to justify arms. Such arms are said to be either defensive or non-lethal. Rubbish! 2,000-pound bombs, defensive or non-lethal? Is that what it is? Are these 2,000-pound bombs defensive? So every time Israel is bombing Gaza and killing children, that's defensive? Export licenses. I never knew this, that I assume it should have happened. Thousands of citizens from the United States, Russia, France, Ukraine have served in the Israeli military. Why is there no prosecution? Are UK citizens allowed to participate in foreign wars for a foreign country? So how come these UK girls and boys that go to the IDF are never prosecuted? What your organization should do in the UK is that find them out and engage in a private prosecution of these individuals. We have the same thing, South African white Jews going to Israel to participate there. And Palestinians are perpetual guinea pigs. Perpetual guinea pigs, as Anthony Loewenstein, the author of the Palestine Laboratory, states that, as you can clearly see here, the ongoing genocide has enabled Israel to expand the range of weaponry and surveillance systems tested on the Gaza population. As a result, the value of arms exports increased by 18% during the genocide, which exports to the EU more than doubling and accounting for 54% of Israeli military exports. Other significant destinations, including Arab countries, Asia, and the Pacific, well, those Arab countries that are supportive of Israel.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah wa barakatuh.
Anam, how are you, Anam?
I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. I haven't spoken to you since the ceasefire, or like before the ceasefire.
So-called ceasefire.
Yeah,
Exactly. It's not a ceasefire. Have you seen this report that I'm discussing now?
yeah, and but even the last show also you mentioned that the colonial plan to divide Gaza, you called it, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
But so, brother, I wanted to, because last time, a few times ago, I had mentioned to you, would it have been better off if we had just accepted Oslo when we had the chance, in 2000, under Bill Clinton, and you said, in hindsight, it looks good and everything. But what I'm just saying is, we agreed the two-state solution is difficult, but despite our differences, I want to try to figure out how do we get out of this awful situation we find ourselves in.
Well, I mean, the situation as we find it now, I mean, there's no chance for a two-state solution. You agree with me? I mean, the Israelis don't even want us. You're talking about a two-state solution. Netanyahu has made it clear he doesn't want a Palestinian state. There's never, from the perspective of the present Israel. I mean, it's one thing talking about the past. We can't talk about 20 years ago. The reality of the situation is they don't want a Palestinian state. That's a reality. I mean, so what do you do in a situation like that? They're killing in a ceasefire that they've had. They've killed now close to 500 Palestinians in the ceasefire. They've murdered them. I mean, you just saw the killing that's happened just 2 days ago, being shot in the West Bank. You must have seen the videos I showed you now. Shot, and then they had the crane crush them with the shutters of the garage. They've been doing that en masse in Gaza. I mean, there's no debate. There's no longer a debate on this issue. This is the problem. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how anyone could even defend this any longer. I mean, it's reached a point of no. I'm sure this is going to end somehow, but it's not going to be good for the Palestinians. And to talk about retrospective anachronisms is just not going to help, because that's not going to happen. But Netanyahu stated, he says now in the Israeli press, regardless of what Trump or anyone else says, firstly, the story of two Palestinian states. Let me just finish this point. The idea of two states is really, I mean, you can't even contemplate it logistically.
DOA.
Let's assume the genocide didn't happen.
DOA.
It was reaching a point of no return. But now it's a point of no return. They don't want a state. They don't want a state.
Yeah.
They don't want a state. So what are we going to do?
So
don't want it.
I'm in the same confusion, you know. First, I don't know how we got. I mean, how did we get here? You know, but and then the thing is, though, despite the fact that Britain and France and Europe is going to recognize Palestine, like, what does that do for anybody to have like an embassy, you know, from some bureaucrat from Ramallah? What does that do?
That's hypocritical. I mean, the embassy. Firstly, the Palestinian Authority is a corrupt. But you know, they were once upon a time. The PLO was once upon a time a credible organization. The Palestinian Authority, run by Abbas. Abbas is a geriatric, 87-year-old man. He's got no relevance. The Palestinian Authority is a watchdog of the Israelis in the West Bank. They engage in the same amount of brutality for and on behalf of the Israelis. So they are under, the Palestinian Authority are dictating to the Palestinians, but they are operating under the Israeli control. And they're under Israeli autonomy. So they're not, the Palestinian Authority is not autonomous. First, it's a corrupt organization. It's morally bankrupt. The Palestinians don't want it. There's a bigger support for Hamas. Certainly now there's going to be a bigger support for Hamas, both in the West Bank and Gaza, and groups like Islamic Jihad than there ever was. And the Israelis don't want, the Israeli politicians, the Knesset, this is, if you look at the past Israeli governments, as bad as they were, and I'm talking about going back to the Nakba of 48, and then you had people like Golda Meir, who were, the typical James Bond type villains that you basically see. We've reached a stage that this is the worst Israeli government ever in the history of the Israeli state. This one presently we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's an extremist.
They are beyond reproach. I mean, this is a genocidal, beyond craziness.
It's very interesting, because even though in the 70s, right, you can draw a direct line from like these settlers to the government that keeps Netanyahu in power today, but you're right though. Like they and by the way, they are becoming unchecked, because if this hadn't happened, the October War, the 2 years ago, if this hadn't happened, they were trying to pack the courts, they were trying to pack the judiciary. And the Haredi law, like Israeli society has a lot of fissures in it, and their coalition was like very close to collapsing because
there was a civil war. People are talking about a civil war happening within Israeli society. Gideon Levi and so on. We're talking about the fact that the judiciary, But I mean, things were crumbling. Things were crumbling. There was
Like
dissatisfaction
it's
happening.
very much like India, like in the 70s, we were a socialist country, and a lot of the lawyers like who founded India were British lawyers, so they had a
Yeah.
lot of highfalutin ideals. Like Nehru was very, his speeches were beautiful, and so then the thing is though, who runs the country, right? It's these like brigands and vagabonds, people who have no business running a country. The Hindu nationalists. They just appeal to the lowest common denominator, and they ride the wave to power. At least Congress, like I remember, like there's an idea that because Muslims are such an important minority in India, they would like even in 2003 we had Manmohan Singh, who was a Congress prime minister. He said Muslims should get the first fruits of the country, right? There was an idea that being the largest minority, you should give them quotas and special access to take advantage, to help them out of the poverty that Muslims in Bihar and major states, find themselves in. So, like India had a lot of like good ideals at its founding, and now it sours somehow. Like you can't, I mean, I hate to say it, but the British lawyers, Gandhi, Nehru, and yourself, so. But the British educated lawyers,
I'm
right?
not in that level of. I'm not in the caliber of some of the lawyers and individuals you mentioned. But I just want to ask you this question, because this report basically makes 2 points. It's one thing, and I enjoy speaking to you, but I want to ask you, what do we do when a report speaks about the nexus? Because okay, we have a satanic state which is just out of control completely. What about the other states, I mean, that have so-called symbolically recognized Palestine, but there's still a nexus where you've got, for example, the complicity in relation to the provision of funds, weapons, fuel, intelligence,
Reconnaissance
diplomatic.
flights.
All of that is continuing. It's happening. And now you've got these leaders, these Arab leaders. I don't know whether it's a strategy, whether, if you look at the meeting with MBS, and the meeting between Jolani and Trump just a month or two ago.
Yeah.
Sprayed with perfume, I mean, and spoken down in a condescending manner. I mean, what's happening with our leadership in the Muslim world? The leadership in the Muslim world is problematic.
Yeah.
Highly problematic.
See, here's, I mean, there's definitely, something amazing. Even the Egyptian revolution that happened, I read somewhere that the reason they took who was the guy who replaced Mubarak, the Muslim Brotherhood guy?
Sisi.
No, before Sisi though, there was a Muslim Brotherhood guy. The guy who actually Mohammed Morsi, right?
He replaced Hosni Mubarak.
He won democratically, right? And somehow they removed him, right? And so. But the idea was that the Muslim Brotherhood government, they were thinking of tearing up the peace accord between Egypt and Israel. And so I feel like something like that, and by the way, Egypt is the largest army in the Arab and Muslim world. So like the fact that they defanged Egypt, and also, by the way, they were supposed to freeze the settlements in the 73 and sorry, in the 79 Camp David Accords. They had already agreed to that, which was funny. So that was a prerequisite for the Camp David Accords, that they were not allowed to build anymore in the occupied territories. So, which is a joke today, right? Because now there's so many settlements, you can't even remove them. There's a whole.
Remove them. Right? It's too late.
It's called Ariel University. I remember I watched a documentary. They have like a major university in the middle of the West Bank. It's a whole city, and they're all connected, and it's a bunch of, But so, brother, sorry, what was your question?
The Oslo Accords. Just to make one point on the Oslo Accords. Brother. It didn't resolve, and I'm talking about the 93 and 95.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was signed in 93, right? Yeah. But then there was the Camp David 2 in 2000.
I mean, I don't think much of Clinton. Clinton was the snake.
He saved it for his last year in office. A president doesn't have any political capital in his last year. But sorry,
Clinton's last year in office would have been in 99, 2000.
Yeah. So that's the year when he put Arafat and Ehud Barak in a room, and he
the meeting between him, facilitating the handshake between Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin, I think happened in
93
around about
on the White House lawn.
93.
Yeah.
Right
It was
about
on the
93.
lawn of the White House, by the way, so it was quite historic.
But I don't think the Oslo. You see, the Oslo Accords. I wouldn't have. Would you have signed the Oslo Accords?
Yeah, brother. I mean, like, sitting here in 2025, like Gaza's destroyed, I would sign it. I mean, like, even I mean, what I'm saying is,
no. See, here's the problem. Here's the
Yeah.
issue that at that stage nobody was contemplating 2025 genocide or 2020,
Right.
2023. The problem is that number one, it prohibited the establishment of new settlements, but in
Right.
the interim period, for that period between 93 and 95, it allowed for the continued expansion of existing
existing
ones.
settlements.
That's the first thing. The
right,
second thing is that the aspect of issues like the borders,
right. It was
Jerusalem,
undefined.
the rights of
undefined,
refugees. That
undefined.
was never agreed to. In fact, they always told about it that would be deferred to possibly
Stage
final
2.
status talks.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were the agreement itself also prohibited. I think whilst they prohibited the new settlements, they allowed for the expansion of existing ones, which I mean essentially is a continuation of settlements. in
Yeah,
general
because they play this game
And
where they
then,
don't renew Palestinian settlements and they renew Israeli ones. The permits.
and then in relation to
Mhm.
the I don't know, the occupation itself,
You
there
can't
was-
even build a
there was
bathroom in your own
nothing-
house.
There was nothing which gave to say, look, if you want to have Gaza and West Bank, you've now got a sovereign country with a fully developed army, air force, air base, land, control of the air, control of the ground, control of borders, and independence. That was never there. So essentially, the expansion of the settlements was widely considered to be one of the biggest obstacles to the Oslo Accord not being successful. And I don't know, Bill Clinton in his memoirs keeps on speaking about, how well he did or how well he could have done, and they seem to pass the blame on Arafat. There's a lot of things that can be said negatively about Yasser Arafat, but I don't think he was. I don't honestly think he was to blame for the collapse of the Oslo Accords. I don't think he was to blame. I think history has been harsh to him. He was compromised in a later
here's
stage,
the-
but history has been somewhat harsh to him.
Yeah, I mean, but I want to answer. So you asked me about the report, though. I came on your show. I want to give
Yeah,
you
the
the
report
courtesy.
that we just did now. Yeah.
So you're saying that the human rights violations are like up and down, like it doesn't have any. Sorry. So what was your? What was
No.
the
I'm saying
rest
the
of your question?
genocide is ongoing, but the latest report, and in fact, I don't know if you saw the discussion we had on the Max Planck Institute of the Max Planck Institute. Basically, at the beginning of this discussion, it gave figures which are way in excess of the Gaza Ministry of Health figures. So the Gaza Ministry of Health states you're looking at something like 70,000 dead. But the Max Planck Institute is saying that something in the range of 120,000 Palestinians have been mass murdered. More than 100,000 plus, because they've got a model for calculation, including possible dead bodies, including mortality rates decreasing, and so on and so forth. So their figures are far higher than the figures that are done by the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is basically ironical because everybody has been saying that the Gaza Ministry of Health was over exaggerated, but now the figures by these independent parties, including the IDF, is higher than that of the Gaza Ministry of Health, because the Gaza Ministry of Health only looks at figures from hospitals and statistics it gives in actual recorded deaths.
And it doesn't
But
distinguish, by the way, between civilian and
Yeah.
military deaths. So that's why anyway. Sorry, go ahead.
But the point is that it gives the overall figure, but
It's
we're now having a
undercounting.
figure that the Lancet, in fact, gives reports of estimates, and these are rough estimates of close to 200,000. So that's a significant figure. I mean, imagine if that had happened in Ukraine by now, what the response would have been.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of children in Ukraine. I'm just trying to think about, if you look at Ukraine children deaths. I mean, they are. I'm just saying from since 2021, since Russia invasion, I'm just looking at the statistics. Since Russia invasion, the Ukraine deaths, children's deaths since Russia invasion, as of late 2020, November 2025, the United Nations has verified the deaths of at least, hear this out, and think about Gaza, of at least 726 children since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine in February 2023. I mean, that's bad enough. In any event, if it's one child, it's bad enough. And over 2,200 children have been
Right.
Contrast that with a smaller land area like Gaza. I mean, it's just insane. It's
And
just
also, the war is
absolutely
much
insane.
shorter than the Ukraine war.
Well, yeah, the war is much shorter. I mean, it's much shorter. I mean, Ukraine started in, when was the Ukraine war? Ukraine war was in 2022, right? And we're now
Yeah.
looking at 2025. Only 726 children have been. And how many? I'm just thinking, how many Ukrainian civilian deaths? I don't even know. And I mean, Ukrainian society, Ukrainian civilian deaths. I think. I'm just trying to see the figures. Yeah, as of late 2025, the officer of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has verified at least 14,534 civilian deaths since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Now, it could be higher, but I mean, the point I'm trying to say is just look at the stark comparison between the two and the double standards and hypocritical responses of the United States and the UK government to what was happening in the UK, particularly from the far right and the MAGA movement. Although there's a split in the MAGA movement now, and you contrast that with Gaza. I mean, it's chalk and cheese, really, chalk and cheese. And I think that's a distinction that you have here, and between the two. I mean, I don't know. There needs to be more done. I was seeing something. I was saying, what is this video that I wanted to share with you now that you're here?
Oh, brother, you're gonna make you watch a video. It's but okay. So just you were showing that video before of the Janine incident.
No, not that.
No, I got you. But I wanted to say, while there's videos, there's another video of Hamas like pretending to hide the body of a hostage, and then they say, "Oh, we found it," and the drone is recording.
No,
it.
I saw that.
And then they
I
hand it
saw
over.
that.
So I'm saying, both sides are really experts
No,
at
but
propaganda
I
here.
saw that. But
There's a lot of the camera will catch that both have ministries of propagating information.
But there's no
and
moral
disinformation.
equivalence. I mean, look, I saw the picture, the story you were talking about that picture. I've seen that video. It was in fact even a different area, and about the purported claim that they were looking for hostages. They buried them and then they picked them up. But that was a totally different area, and I've seen that. But I'm saying that there's no equivocation. There can be no equivocation between what the Israelis are doing and what Hamas is doing. Hamas is effectively a non-state actor, and I mean, you've seen the gruesomeness of the Palestinian.
They've run Gaza since 2007. They are the state.
Yeah, but they're not a state. They're not a state. That's a problem. I mean, they can't. Gaza is not a state. This is the problem people make. Gaza has never been a state in terms what Hamas. Hamas has never had a legal status as a government as such.
It kind of does though, like just in the sense that in 2006, this is not funny. It's tragic actually, but Condoleezza Rice insisted that Hamas be allowed to run for elections, and then they won in 2006. And that was very surprising for many people. And I actually cheered them on because I was like, but just like the Muslim Brotherhood won in Egypt, and that guy Mohammed Morsi, he died in jail. So it's like it's kind of really sad how you put your anyway. So anyway, my point in saying this is that they have status because they are the last time an election was held in the Palestinian Authority, they had legitimate control over the Gaza in that way.
No. But I think that they need to correct you. The issue is this. I mean, this is just a fact.
20 years
Hamas
coming on
is
election.
it's a political movement, and it's a de facto governing authority over the Gaza Strip, which is not a country. Now, the key point that we need to know is that it's a governing entity, not a sovereign state, because if it's a sovereign state, then it would effectively be exercising independent control over the borders, the land, the airspace, the food and water supply, the infrastructure, even the mining rights and the mineral rights within Gaza and the surrounding area. So since it seized power, it's just simply a governing body. Because if you look at the broader entity of Palestine that holds non-observer status at the United Nations, that's associated with the Palestinian Authority, which governs parts of the West Bank. It's never been with Hamas. Hamas has never been the administration, or the Hamas administrative control has never been recognized at the United Nations. So the UN has never, and of course the United States has designated.
Well, also just to
which is rubbish.
So there's also a reason for that, unfortunate reason, right? The 93 Oslo Accords, they made the PLO the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. And so somehow that allowed, Arafat and Abbas, they to be like, like stooges or whatever you want to call them, right? Like figureheads, puppets. I remember when Arafat died, the BBC's obituary of him said he was the president without a state. So that's funny. Like your obituary ends with a joke. Because it's almost like you're the king of your own hill, basically. So which is what he was, and then. But yes, so I agree though that there's no. You're correct. It doesn't have that. But what I'm trying to. Okay. But here's where I want to put. Anyway, I mean, I don't mean to push back against you, right? But the most basic idea of a state is, though, first in political science you have a monopoly of violence. So you're the only one who is allowed to arrest people and execute people and things like that. And then, so that's the first thing a state does, right? Everybody else is a gang, and then your gang is called the police. So just speaking from anarchist terms. So, but then the other thing is, though, what I'm saying is, though, because the Israeli authorities were lulled into a false sense of security, because they allowed the Qataris to come over and hand them suitcases full of cash every month, like 2, 3, 4, 5 million, of cash every month, just to keep their daily expenses going, pay the salaries, pay the school teachers, pay the police officers, because you don't have an economy when you're choked, right? Like, you can't breathe when you're choked. So obviously if you don't have an airport, if you don't have a seaport, like if there's no import export, like, you need funds from somewhere. So they had achieved, what I'm saying was, they've kind of achieved like a normalized de facto state status. And
I don't think they did. They can't, because effectively firstly, it cannot be a state if it's under illegal occupation. I mean, up to including 2007 right to now, Gaza has always been perpetually under occupation. Israel could turn off the water supply, it could turn off the lights. Hamas could do nothing in relation to that. Hamas could not even have an armed force.
Qatar built the desalination plants, so they have their own water.
Yeah, but that too was again under Israeli autonomy. Right. You see, the Israelis could stop that at any given. Hamas never had any independence to engage it. So if, for example, tomorrow, like they did, they switch off the water and the electricity and the lights and stop all food, Hamas could do nothing. Right. That's not a state. No, Hamas had no armed forces. That's not a state. Gaza was still being illegally occupied on the one side.
Fair enough.
Egypt control,
You're correct. You're correct.
So none of this basically fulfills the definition of what a state is. At best, it is just simply a resistance movement, with the legitimate sense, a resistance movement which had some sort of governing control at a limited sense, like a Bantustan kind of governing authority there. But that's not a state. That's not a country. See, when you say it's a state, then it has nation state status, and that's clearly not what it is.
So, sorry, just about the October 7th. Right? We find ourselves where, by international agreement, this useless PLO is the sole legitimate leader of the Palestinian people.
Yeah,
But Hamas's action in 2 years ago actually makes it the forefront of the Palestinian movement.
absolutely.
So we're we it's funny anyway. I mean, it's not funny. I mean, it's something we have to work with.
No, absolutely, it does. It does. It does, and I think as many people have basically suggested it. I mean, effectively, it's a form of political resistance. The main aim, as I've told you, and I think we've debated this whole point before, was that the reason behind the Operation Al-Aqsa floods was to basically get to negotiate a hostage exchange. So they were going to basically take Israelis as hostages, and I think mainly Israeli soldiers as hostages, and then, of course, negotiate that exchange with Palestinian prisoners languishing in their dungeons and Sdei Teman and all these other places. When they entered the southern areas of Israel, where those kibbutzes were, as I think one commentator, Michael Clark, made the point, they never knew that there was these music festivals there. They never knew, apparently, that a lot of them were these music festivals. And then the other point you've got is that when they broke into the gates and entered Israel, it was not entering into a foreign country. It's entering into a land where their forefathers had come from, which was being occupied by them, which they come from. But a lot of criminal elements also came into Israel. There were criminal elements as well that were also shooting, not just Hamas. And because Hamas leadership have made it clear that if there has been any clear violations, they would welcome an investigation. When the arrest warrants were issued, they stated they would be willing to stand before the ICC. If Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, of course, go to the ICC, they would also go and make themselves available. But clearly, Netanyahu and Gallant didn't. So come October 7th, you have a situation where criminal elements were there. And, of course, the well-known Hannibal Directive. Now, of course, the figures are much higher because Israeli media has long since blown open those convoys of destroyed vehicles by the Israeli Defense Force. I mean, that's not even a debate in Israeli society amongst the Israelis who themselves have been exposed by their own media. It's still only a debate in the Western media, in Western society. So now you still have people talking about, guys like, what's his name? This Israeli propagandist that was quite regular. He was a speaker on Morgan and many of these other chapters. That guy there, Levi, Elon Levi. Still speaks about beheaded babies and mass rapes and all of that. And I mean, that's been long debunked, but it still serves, and people still believe it. Trump still believes it. Trump still promotes that. Morgan still speaks about mass rape. He knows that he was wrong on the beheaded babies, but he talks about mass rape when it's quite clear none of that happened, or at least not on the scale that it had. And even assuming there was crimes committed, there were also criminal elements that entered Israel, and I mean gangs. I mean now of course, that we've got gangs. You've got gangs in Gaza that have been backed by the Israelis, the Abu Shahab ISIS gang. Why would Israel back ISIS, Anam? Why would they back ISIS? Why would they support ISIS? Because it's Avigdor Lieberman, this right-wing fanatic from the Ehud Barak era, who's opposed to Netanyahu, and made the claim that Netanyahu is backing ISIS in Israel. Why? I mean, in Gaza. Why would they do that? So it's clearly it's got nothing to do with terrorism. It's got everything to do with control, with divide. I mean, just like this Trump, I don't know if you've seen, it's getting pretty late here, but I don't know if you've seen this international lawyer from the United States, Craig Mokhiber. Are you familiar with Craig Mokhiber?
No.
It's a pity I don't have your email. I'd like to send you his piece and analysis that he did. I think leave your email in the, because I still don't have your email for some reason. Leave your email in the message box, and there's some interesting developments and material that I'd like to forward you. But just leave it in the chat itself. But essentially, what he's saying that even the Trump plan that has been proposed in relation to the so-called 20-point plan, where Palestinians have absolutely no say, just nothing. It's just like kind of a neo-colonial relic, where other people are dictating to and deciding the lives of people on land that they have stolen and taken away. I mean, you couldn't make them up. It's like somebody comes to your house, puts you in the toilet, and then subdivides your house and say, look, this person will now stay here. That person will do this. You can only come out of the toilet at 2:00. You can't go to the kitchen because there's a yellow line we're going to put there. You can't enter the lounge. If you walk, whether it's your child walking or infant walking, they'll be shot dead. That's essentially what you've got. So why should anyone even accept that? Why you can't negotiate your liberation? I mean, when it happens, like in the South African context, I see the results of that every day of my life 30 years later. Things are not in the best of positions in South Africa, politically speaking. It could have been better had things been done differently. But no oppressor will negotiate with the oppressed to liberate you. No oppressor does that. That's a de facto rule of the principle of tyranny, that the tyrant will not de facto negotiate with that individual that he tyrannizes or oppresses to give up that oppression. It never happens. It's never happened historically. It's never happened in the 20th century. It's not going to happen today. I don't know. There has been one thing that has happened, and you'll probably agree, that the propaganda that we used to hear, and you probably are familiar with the Israeli talking points from the mid-2000s and the late 90s, was very powerful. It was very powerful once upon a time. That power is no longer there. That power in the mainstream media has totally collapsed. The traditional mainstream media power, and those traditional stations that are trying to, even the BBC and some of them have turned on Israel somewhat, to a certain extent. Although they try and present the Israeli position and the Israeli narrative, they've turned, they've changed. So there's a global shift in world opinion, which has become, like a trickle and has now basically become a flood. That has changed now drastically, and I think for the rest of its living memory, how long it lasts in the future, everybody, the entire world, when you talk about genocide, it will be associating Israel with the word genocide. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think if there's one positive thing that comes out of there, evil is on display. The one distinguishing thing between Israel and the Nazis, which I always make the point, is that, well, certainly we never had social media back then, but the Nazis were not boasting that they are putting the Jews in the concentration camps. They never boasted. They never promoted it to the world. There was, of course, propaganda against the Jews prior to the commencement of the Holocaust and what happened in World War II. But it was only after the Allied forces entered Auschwitz and Dachau that they discovered for the first time the death camps. Same thing in Cambodia. I don't think Pol Pot, for example, went and promoted the idea that Year Zero, the silent death of Cambodia, is something that they were advertising and promoting to the world. This was discovered by reporters and journalists like John Pilger and so on that, exposed what was happening in Cambodia. The only exception to this are the Israelis. They broadcast their crimes in broad daylight. They broadcast it in broad daylight. So that's a distinction that you've got. That's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. I know also, usually because it's late for you, we usually wrap up. But I wanted to, if I could, respond to a few points. So the first thing, I'll do a tangent. It's something I remember there was even a video game I played back in 2005, Metal Gear Solid. It talked about the danger of privatized armies and robotic armies. And now we live in AI, and we have Palantir and Microsoft, complicit in this, and it's very interesting. You know, like you covered the Where's Daddy software. So in your prior streams where they're able to hunt down, you know, Hamas leaders when they're having dinner with their families.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, but for me, the crazy thing will be, right, because, you know, like, you know, Hannah Arendt, you know, and other political science and political philosophers, especially post Europe World War II, they discuss like the banality of evil, and they also discuss how mechanisms for colonization or or like occupation and like dehumanizing people become more and more like banal, which is like ordinary, right? You're not horrified by it. So my thing is, you know, if this continues, right, because we have no optimism on the horizon, you know, we're gonna have like AI soldiers policing Gaza, and like AI's, you know, facial recognition software means if your face or my face looks 90% or 99% like, you know, someone that they're looking for, you know, the robot's going to pull the trigger, and there's no, like, you know, you can't prosecute a robot, right? So it's just going to be like, you know, like, in other words, there's going to be parts of the...
That's happening. And if you look at even Sinwar was killed by a drone.
Right.
It's happening now.
They filmed his last moments, like he was hours bleeding out, and the drone was like hovering around, I think, for his last moments. So you're right. You know, I agree. So, and this is how you police a whole, you know, like territory of people, and it's very dystopian, right? Like, I mean, you know, like District 9 was a movie about South Africa and how we. So, you know, like the dehumanization of people with technology is going to become like ordinary, or like you know, in other words, it's going to become like, you know, like the same. And you know, like people in the first world, we're going to get drones delivering our tacos, you know. So it's going to be like, oh, I get my Amazon delivery in 2 hours, you know, and you know, I get my Pizza Hut in 2 hours. So it's going to be nothing but convenience for us, and it's going to be like colonization for Congo and, you know, any part of the world that like doesn't comply with the capitalist order. They're just going to be like patrolled by machines, basically. You know, it's going to be very dystopian. That's my fear. But I wanted to. So this is the future. You know, if humanity doesn't watch itself, you know, we're going to be in like this like this hellscape. You know, hellish landscape. But I wanted to object to you, brother. So when you said, you know, one thing you said, when you said that they crossed the border from Gaza into Israel, you know, on October 7th, and they were just crossing into the land of their forefathers. So here's my thing, brother. So you talk about UN resolutions and human rights conventions and international agreements and international norms, right? So we listed out in 47 that there was a partition plan, and more or less that was agreed to. And now I understand your analogy that if someone says you can't leave the bathroom, and if you're in the hallway at 2 p.m. you'll be shot dead, or at 2 a.m. you're going to be shot dead. You know, like that's not a wrong analogy in any way. But we have all these agreements for a reason. And I think, you know, even now, like, you know, here's my dream, right? Because I painted this hellish landscape, right? I think that's enough to depress everybody and say, what kind of future are we living in? Where like if you and me live in a nice part of the world, brother Muhammad, we live in a nice part of the world, you know, like we get Amazon deliveries, you know, and you know, our life is nothing but more convenience because of technology. And then there's the part of the world that is somehow, you know, living under the gun of the imperialist rulers, you know. And so I feel, you know, if we like remove, like, let's say Netanyahu says, I don't believe in a two-state solution, and the U.S. president somehow gets him removed, then we can release Marwan Barghouti, right? And right now Israel says, you know, he has blood on his hands. But at this point, you know, like Netanyahu has an ICJ warrant. Like, you know, like you said, the defense minister has an ICJ warrant. Everybody has blood on their hands at this point. We can somehow lead to some kind of technocratic agreement, and there's a unity government between the PLO and Hamas. And do you think it would be high time for, like, you know, just we live on our side, they live on their side? Would you be optimistic about that?
I don't know. I mean, Gaza's been totally demolished.
Yeah.
What is left of Gaza? What are they left
So
with?
the current plan, like, is I don't know if you covered it. I didn't watch your last show.
I've seen that there was a live
on the
stream.
yellow side of the line.
But the current plan is highly problematic. Highly
They're going to
problematic.
rebuild like half of Gaza.
They want. Who's going to rebuild it? Who's
Yeah.
going to rebuild it? This is the point.
Yeah.
Who's going to rebuild Gaza?
Right.
Unless they've got, if Trump and Kushner and all these guys rebuild it, I mean,
Well, it takes
they're
30
also
years to
going to use it.
rebuild
They're going
something,
to privatize it. They're going to privatize it. It's not going to be. It's not going to be for the Palestinians. I mean, right now you've seen the planes that are being. I must do an earlier show one of the days where we discuss what happened in South Africa, where these Palestinians were being brought into the country, and effectively by an Israeli Estonian linked to the IDF, basically conveyed and transferred these Palestinians from Israel to South Africa. But let's do a show on this. Let's do an earlier show on this when I'm far more fresh.
Thank you for having me.
And basically, we've always wanted to have a setup. What I would suggest one day is let's just have a setup where you have a series of issues and then we explore them, but probably at a much more earlier time. Maybe even during the course of this week, we could probably do that. I'll touch base with you, and then we'll look at some of the core issues that have affected the Israelis and the Palestinians over the past couple of years, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope things are doing
Fantastic.
better. Salam.
Fantastic on your side. I'm going to call it a day, so thanks for that, Anam. And so basically, it's pretty late here. I've had a number of challenges. Brother Muhammad will tell you I still have challenges on my side. Wife's not been too well, and I need to obviously attend to her. But we'll have this discussion shortly, and again in the next couple of days, inshallah. But till then, this is Yusuf Ismail on behalf of the South African Debate Initiative and Muhammad from the Coventry Faith Foundation. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace.